Hi everybody, Rob here from Price Studios, and a little while back I started doing some modelling tutorials on YouTube, and I had quite a lot of questions from people about how to build the set rather than the actual object, and how to do a bit of the lighting and apply some materials, that sort of thing. So with the announcement of R22 or S22, whatever you want to call it, of Cinema 4D, I thought I would go back to basics and start a new course, and starting off with building a set. So let's jump straight in, and I'm going to build this room. So this is kind of like a Georgian style room, and I'm going to show you just a quick overview of the process. It doesn't have to be complicated. We can stay quite simple. So let's start with a box. This will be our room. So I'm going to make this room 8 meters by 3 meters by 5 meters. Now, I'm not going to go into everything. Hopefully you know a few of the basics, but do ask questions below if you're stuck on anything. So just to talk about navigation just briefly, I'm holding the Alt or Option key, left mouse button to kind of orbit around the scene, and middle mouse button to drag and pan up, down, left and right. And you can either use the mouse wheel if you've got one, or Alt, Option and the right mouse button to zoom in and out. Okay, so we've got this box, and you can see it's not really sitting on the floor. So if we come down to this panel here, which is your kind of navigation, orientation and everything, you can see it's got position, size and rotation. I'm just going to knock this up by half of the y-axis height of this. So that's 150 centimeters, and that's now sitting on the floor. Now, if you want to fill your view with your currently selected object, and your list of objects is in this top right panel here, you can see cube. With the cursor over that window, hit S, and that now fills the view. If you want to see everything in the scene, you can hit H, which does something similar, but you get all of your objects. Okay, so what do we need to do to make this into an actual room? Well, let's go to make this editable. So you can hit the C key or hit this button up here, and this is now editable geometry. And you can see the icon has changed from the cube to this picture of a polygon, which means it's a polygon object. Now, down the left hand side here we have various different options. I'm going to click on this one, which is to choose faces. You can see if I click on one, it gets selected. Now what I want to do is I want to cut some windows. So what I want to do is divide these faces. So I'm going to hit KL to do a loop cut, and you can see as I hover over an edge, it takes a kind of perpendicular route around the object based on that edge. So I could do this way or this way. So I'm going to click on there, and I'm going to come over to my attributes panel. Now this is an important one in Cinema 4D. This is where kind of most of your tool settings will live. So I'm looking here and I'm seeing the distance is 223.525. Now that's not quite right. What I want to do is I can either use this slider to change this. I can type it in numerically, or I can drag this up here, or I can double click in that text field there. So I'm just going to say 75%. I can make another cut here, and I know I want this to be 100, so I'm just going to double click in this field, and I'm going to lift that 100, so this will be 100 centimeters from the bottom edge, so that's a third of the way up. So the gap here is slightly bigger than the gap here, and if you imagine a Georgian room, this would be kind of like where the picture hanging rail would be, and this would be like where your dado rail is. Right, I'm going to do 2 more cuts. Actually, I might do 4 more cuts. I'm going to do one here, which is going to be, let's say, 25%. Actually, I want that to be 20%. So type 20 in. I'm going to have another cut, which will be at 40. I'm going to come in. Actually, I'm not keen on that. I think I'll do. Let's call that 70. No. Let's go 75. So I'm partially eyeballing this. 25, and then that one 40. Right. I'm also going to add a couple of cuts here. Now, something to remember in 3D is that if it's not seen, and it's not going to be seen in like a reflection or something, don't worry too much about it. The CG is all about faking it so it looks good. It doesn't have to be 100% real. Don't spend effort and time if you don't need to. What I'm doing here is I'm just making these windows, which are basically going to give me room to put a camera in there so I can see the room and let in a little bit of extra light, which will really help. It will help the room just feel more realistic and natural, but it also helps speed up your renders because that extra light coming in will help the scene clean up better. So I'm just going to shift click on these 3 polygons here, and I'm going to hit backspace just to delete them. I'm going to just swivel around here, and I'm going to do the same, shift clicking these 2, but I'm going to hit the D key, and I'm going to extrude these. Just going to pull them out, and I'm just keeping an eye on the offset in the attributes manager as I drag, and I'm going to go to about 35 centimeters. It doesn't have to be exact. In fact, I will be exact. I'll just type it in. So let's go 35, and I'm going to hit space key to drop that tool, and then hit backspace to delete those polygons. And what I have now is, if I zoom in a bit, let's just come into the room, just lift up my view, swivel around, and obviously do that really badly. Now you can see I'm in this room and I've got these 2 windows. These are going to be where the main light source of the sun comes in. And I think first thing to do now for me is going to be to, you know what, I'm going to delete these 2 faces as well. Just makes life that little bit easier. And most of these renders I think are going to be done in 16:9 HD kind of format, so let's just set that up. Now you can do this various ways. You can type it in here if you want. In fact, let's do that. Let's just go 1920 by 1280 or 1080. Actually, let's go 1080. I'm not going to worry about frame rates or anything. I'm not doing any animation with this. Now at this point we can choose which kind of renderer we're going to use. We could use the physical or the standard or any others, third parties. Now just a note, in some of my videos you might see various different menus and icons along here, and there'll be some extra menu items. Because I'm trying to keep this fairly basic, this is a completely fresh install as you would get it out of the box of S22 of Cinema 4D. So that if you see anything untoward, that's all it is. It just might be a different version that I'm using. Right, so let's come down to effect. Now, in fact, before I do that, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just going to render this scene, just the viewport. There you go. That's it. That does not look pretty in any way, shape or form. And that's because all we're doing is basically rendering out the geometry with kind of flat colours. There's no lighting information, there's nothing going on. I could add a light in the scene if I wanted, just like this. And it still won't be much prettier. There'll be a little bit of kind of brightness here, but again, it doesn't look great. So let's kill that light. Let's add, I'm going to use some global illumination and an HDR as well as a light for this scene. So let's just, I'm going to add a camera to the scene by clicking on the camera icon, and I'm just going to look through it by clicking on this button here in my object panel. Now I'm going to click that again. That just sets it so that this view is looking through this, or that camera is based on this view. If I click it again, I can then come away and you can see that camera in the scene looking through that window. I wanted to back out, I wanted to save that view and then back out so I can show you what I'm doing. So I'm going to click on here, this icon of the floor, which also holds in it various different options. I'm going to use a sky, and I'm going to double click in my materials panel, which is this bottom left one, to create a new material. I'm just going to right click it and click apply, which will apply it to the currently selected object, which is the sky up here. I'm just going to rename this by double clicking sky and double click that. I'm going to turn off reflectance. We don't need any reflectance in here. All I need is the color channel to load in an HDR. So where it says texture, just going to go to load object, or sorry, load image. I'm going to use one of my HDRs. You can use whichever one you want, whichever suits your need. That's just loading in now. So I'll close that panel down, and we should see, like so. We can look around, you can see the light direction is actually coming from where I want it. so it will be coming in through those windows. It probably won't be quite strong enough, and there are various things we can do to counter that. But let's go back to our camera view and just hit the render button again and see if anything different happens. No. Now, the reason for this is because we haven't told Cinema 4D that sky dome has any lighting information. And to do that, we need to come down to Effect, and we're going to choose Global Illumination. Now, for now, I'm just going to click on the presets here, and I'm just going to go to HDR Image. And I need to change the gamma from 1 to 2.2, like so. And this still won't look pretty, but you'll get an idea of what's happening. So when I now click Render, you'll see even this pre-pass, and I always like looking at the pre-passes, they're quite pretty. We're getting some light information, and we're getting some kind of realistic shadows. You can see that there's a little bit of darkness in the corners. Still doesn't look great. It's very blotchy, and the blotchiness is coming from the kind of how we're refining the light. If we go back into our settings here, you can see there are some different options, and we have all sorts of things that we can do to help this. One of them would be to increase the diffuse depth, and I think 3 is usually a good number for these interior scenes. Also, there's not a huge amount of light in the scene itself at the moment. Next thing I'm going to do is just go to anti-aliasing, and I'm going to change this from geometry to best, and this helps to smooth out the edges of the actual geometry. So if this was kind of a slopey edge, you might get that kind of stair-stepping thing going on, and that just solves that. I'm not going to change the default settings for now. I am going to change the standard renderer to the physical render though. I just think that suits this kind of scene a bit better. Now I'll just render that again so you can see that one small change, what it's done. You'll also notice that instead of having the different buckets, the little squares that are rendering, you have just this popping around, and it does this kind of a spiral pattern. Now, another thing that will help this blotchiness is to start adding materials. But before we do that, I think we'll start adding some detail to this room, because at the moment it doesn't look all that pretty. It's just a box with some holes in it sitting in the sky. Which also reminds me, we need to back out. So I'm just going to click off my camera view, and I'm going to add a ground to the scene. Now you could use the infinite floor object in Cinema 4D. I prefer to use just a big disk. So in object mode with the big disk there, I'm going to grab one of these orange points on the outside of it, and I'm just going to increase that. And again, you can do this using the outer radius up here as well. And this helps any light within the scene kind of bounce off the floor and then into the room as well, rather than kind of falling away past this kind of weird floating room. And this will have a subtle but definitely appreciable effect on the scene. Right. Now, what's next to do? I think what we'll do is actually go to our camera view again. It's quite useful. And I'm going to select my cube, which I will rename by double-clicking Room. And I'm going to go to Polygon mode. And I'm just going to select... Actually, I'm going to disappear from my camera view. I'm just going to hit the middle mouse button to go into my quad view. And I'm going to choose a different selection tool. So if I click on the selector here and choose rectangle selection, make sure that only select visible elements is off, and then I can come in, select all of those bottom ones, and you can see they got selected here, and middle mouse button to go back to that single view, and hit V, and you go to selection, and I'm going to go to set selection. And this means that those polygons I can always select very easily. So you can see I've got a polygon selection because there's a triangle in the icon, and I've got a name field here in the attributes. So I'm just going to change the name there to floor. And I'm going to then go back to this side view. And I'll do the same for, I'm just going to drop that selection by letting go of it. Go back into the room and select the top. Do the same again, so I'm just going to go V, select, set selection, and you can call this ceiling or roof or whatever. And you can see now I have two. Let's just make this clearer. I'm also going to go to display grid shading lines, because then you can see the geometry a bit clearer. Hopefully in the video that will help. So I can select, by double clicking these two tags, those different bits of geometry, and that is really, really useful. I'm also going to go to the room, and then I'm going to select both of these restore or select polygons. It doesn't let you do two at a time. Okay, not a problem. What I'll do is I'll come down to a side view and I'll select the top, shift select the bottom, and then if I come back to this view so you can see things a bit more clearly, you can see I've got the ceiling and the floor selected. Okay. One thing to be very wary of, and I make this mistake all the time, is if you've got one of these selection tags selected and you make a selection in the scene, then it will add it to that selection, or make any changes you make will be added to that tag. Okay, so now I've got these two parts selected. Hit UI, and that inverts my selection. Now I'm going to hit V again and hit select, set selection, rename this to walls. Now this might seem a bit of an arse backwards way of doing it. You might want to build the walls as separate planes or cubes, and then build it that way, and that is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that at all, and sometimes I would work that way. But I think this is a nice way of showing you how some of the tools in Cinema 4D work. So let's think what we're going to do next. Let's apply a material to the floor. So I'm going to double click here and make a new material. Call this one floor. I can do this a few ways. I can either double click here and I can on the selection tag and then go to apply, and this will be applied just to this floor object. Now something I've just noticed, and I should have mentioned earlier, is you see these weird grey patches. That's because our disk, which is going to be renamed to ground, is on the same plane as the floor, and they're intersecting slightly. So I'm just going to drop that down by 1 centimeter. So if I drop that down by -1, I'm in polygon mode, so you need to be in object mode for that to work. Let's just go -1, and that clears up, and we won't have any issues with that. Okay, back to our floor. Let's load up a material. So let's give this a color file. So let's go to load image, and I'm just going to go to materials. I have a bunch of materials I use for different things. I'm going to use, I think for this, let's go for a wooden floor, and I don't want a deck. Yeah, I think that could work. Okay, so I have a bump. I have this one here, which is quite good for doing reflections, or I have this one for normal. This one for the color channel. Right, so I don't want to copy that into the scene file. Location. Let's just have a quick look at our orientation for this. So we have this tag. We know it's applied to this selection because it's in there. If you wanted to copy it into other places, you could do that quite easily. And at the moment this is set to UV mapping. I'm just going to go for flat, and actually, you know what, I'm going to use cubic for this because I think that will work better. Now just going to turn this around. Now this all looks good, the scaling looks pretty good as well actually, but what I don't like is the direction. I think this might look better if the planks were running left to right. So we can use the offset here to change the start and end point of this texture, which is fine, but that doesn't really do anything for us when it comes to rotation. So what we can do is we can come to the texture tool here, and we can hit R for rotate, and we can just rotate, and if you hold down shift as you rotate, this will kind of snap to 5-degree increments. So I'm going to do that there and go back to object mode. And if I look through my camera, let's have a look how this is looking now. This is, yeah, this is, I think I prefer this. Now obviously we can always change that back. I'm going to just go back to this view again. Now let's play around with some of this. Now I know I've got a normal map to use for this material, so let's load that in. Should take us to here. No, I do not want to change that. Now hopefully you noticed in the viewport that updated. Now one of the new features of Cinema 4D S22 is an improved viewport experience, and normal maps do look better in this new version. Now we have some options. We can turn on high quality for noises, post effects, shadows, all this kind of stuff. Depth of field. I'm not going to worry about too many of these. I will add in reflections, and I will add in shadows. I think those two are both very useful things to have. Okay, let's go to reflectance. Actually, let's go to bump first. I'm just going to add one of those other maps. I'm going to use this one for bump. Nope. Okay, now let's go back to reflectance. I'm going to remove this default specular thing. It's not really that useful for much. And I'm going to use a GGX for this. Now, this has made the whole thing look like kind of bumpy mirror, and that's not what we want. I'm going to set the roughness way up to like 43. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use a layer Fresnel to start with, and I'm going to make this a conductor. I'm going to decrease the IOR. I'm also going to come into layer mask, and I'm going to have two things going on here. So for the layer mask, first of all, I'm going to use, let's just see what a Fresnel would look like. Now this is, I'm looking at this preview icon here. That doesn't look too bad. The reflection is still way too strong, but I'm just going to change this, and I'm going to go to layer. So if I click on this where it says layer, you see it's kept the Fresnel, which is brilliant. I'm also going to add an image, and I think the image I'm going to use is going to be probably that bump map actually. Now the reason I choose this is because using a black and white or grayscale image to define what's shiny or not would suit this image, because where it's dark between the cracks you'd find more kind of like dust and dirt would collect, so it would be less reflective, and then there's a nice bit of variation across the map as well. So I'm going to load that in, and we can blend between the two. So I'm just going to maybe get rid of some of this. I'm also going to reduce the Fresnel. We'll play around with this later if we need to, but I quite like that how it is. And I'm going to reduce the overall strength of this whole map, both the specular brightness and the reflections, until I start to get something I like the look of here. Now when it comes to the color, I'm also, so this at the moment this is just white reflections, and that's fine for a lot of cases. I am also going to change this though to be the same color map as we used for the wood, but I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to use a layer, and I'm going to have just a color shader I think in there, and I'll just reduce that. And this is a way of being able to use these sliders just to change the balance of those two. So we're introducing just a little bit of color into our reflections. Now I think for now this is probably all we need to do. We can come in and refine this more as we need to. Let's just think about some lighting for a minute. So at this point I usually don't want to go on any further until I've got a reasonable light in the scene. Now Cinema 4D has a physics system with a physical sun and sky and everything. We'll probably talk about that in a future video. For now I'm just going to use one single light to enhance my HDR, and I'm going to use an infinite light. What I like about the infinite light is that it's got kind of sun type qualities to it. It's also very easy to use because you can come in here and you can grab it, and it's got this really cool little indicator which helps you define where it's going to be and what it's going to be pointing at. So let's just back out. At the moment this is kind of sitting across the floor. It's on that XZ plane, so I'm going to drag it back and I'll lift it up, and let's just swing it round. So I want this to be looking through the window. If you imagine on our Z axis, which is this blue line here, that's where our object is going to be when we start building objects to do some modeling tutorials. I want this light to be on there, so I'm going to swing this around, and you'll see that that back wall gets some light applied, and now when I swing it down, the floor is going to, and now I can just adjust this as I see fit. I'm going to hit E, just play around with this a bit. Now the position actually makes no difference to the overall result, but sometimes it can help you just get an idea of what's going to be hit by the light, just a bit like so. Now if you want to actually see what this is targeting, what you can do is you can come over to where it says cameras here, and for navigation you can go use camera, set active object as camera, and this will mean that I will be looking down that line, and you can see that's what I'm looking at. That's a really cool, useful tool to be able to just kind of like go, oh, you know what, I want to be looking a little bit more at the floor like so, and then when you come out of this by going to use camera, you can see now this is fixed. Now a couple more things to do with the light. I'm going to warm up the color, and I'm just going to make this very, very slightly warm, and this is to match the HDR, which is kind of a slightly more a warmer sunset kind of a look. Shadows, we can have hard ray trace shadows, which will give you a kind of a good solid edge, or you can have soft shadow maps, which have as you might imagine, a softer look. They are way quicker to render, so while we're setting up we could do that. Now you can see that the new viewport enhancements have given us a good look at how they might actually appear in our final render. Let's just show you the ray traced hard shadows. Okay, that looks pretty good. Actually, because this is an internal scene, I might turn them off in the options. I might just go like this. Let's do a quick render and see that's it looking. Now I've got some more light information, and there are some shadows happening, things like that. I might just pause this video. Let's see how quick it is. I'm using a Wacom engine in a 24-inch Cintiq for this video, which is pretty good. It's got a Quadro, I think it's a P6000 GPU in it, which is cool, but I'm also doing 4K screen recording, all that kind of thing, so it might be a little bit slower than I would normally like. Actually, it's not too bad, and physical renderer is a bit slower than the standard renderer, so let's keep it going. So these floorboards are looking alright. They still don't look great. I think the amount of reflectivity might want to go up just a touch, but we can refine as we go. So next thing to do is going to be, let's just apply some let's make some skirting boards, because this still feels more like a barn than a nice Georgian room. So I'm also going to save my scene at this point. So let's just go File, Save Project As, and just to stick this on my desktop. Let's call this tutorial set. I think it's probably a good place to put it. Now I have a folder for R22 tutorials. Set. Okay, that's why I did one earlier and my machine crashed. So I'll just save over the top of that. That's fine. Right. So I'm going to hit Control N for a new scene. I'm going to go into my front view, and now I'm going to use some spline tools. So I'm just going to use the pen tool. I'm also going to come down to snapping, enable snapping, and just make sure that I have work plane snapping on, and there should be grid under there as well. That's all fine. So let's start on the floor level, and I'm just going to start clicking here, and I'm just going to zoom in so I get this subgrid showing. I'm using a reference of Georgian mouldings for this, and it's going to come up like so, just using the Alt option to drag around my scene, bring this down to the bottom, Okay, hit spacebar to drop that tool. I'm just going to zoom out so I can see it all. Now, this is all looking a bit harsh and not particularly pleasant, so what I need to do is soften some of these out. Now this is going to be one of those kind of semicircular sections, so I'm selecting these 2 points. If I right click, come down to where it says chamfer. Now again, this is one of these tools where I could use the radius in here, or I can click and drag in the viewport. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to click, hold and drag until I get the perfect semicircle. And that's happened because I've used an equal measure of grid points for that curve. Let's take some of these curves here and do the same thing. So I'm just going to go to chamfer, soften those off. Now these would have been harder when they were made, but as, let's just drop that selection, as people do things over time, these get filled up with paint and softened up. Right, sorry, I was just thinking and talking at the same time. So I'm just going to soften those like so, and I think that's probably all I need to do. I might, let's just grab my rectangle selection, and I might just bring them in a little bit like so. Okay, oops. Right, so this is now the profile for our skirting board. What we can do is we can extrude this. So if we add an extrude, make the spline a child of that extrude. Let's go to our viewport here and have a look. And we can see we've got a really nice looking bit of woodwork. At the moment you can see this is massive, this is huge. So I'm going to want this to be kind of like 8 meters long for the long one. And obviously the proportions are all out of whack. So let's select that spline and go into object mode. And you can see at the moment on the y-axis, this skirting board is 375 centimeters tall, when in actual fact we want it to be about 22 centimeters tall. So let's go 22. Okay. Now, what I also failed to do there is I only selected the one axis, so the whole thing just got swished down. Let's just bring this down until it is, I'm looking at my navigation panel there, and I want this to be 22 centimeters, and you can see that here, that's 22. Okay, let's drop that scale tool and let's name this skirting. If this is either too basic or I'm going too fast for you in this first piece, please do let me know in the comments and I'll adjust accordingly for the next part. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this, hit the V key to change back between projects, which is quite handy, it brings up this menu again. Going to set, and then I'm just going to paste this in. Oops. And let's drop my camera view. Now, something you can do, I sometimes accidentally move my camera. What you can do is right click on this, and if you go to this is moved in this version, I think it's in rigging now, we can go to protection, and that means that whatever you do, you can't change the camera's position or anything, you can't accidentally move it around, which means I can just drop it without fear of messing my view up. If I go back to my skirting, I can see, actually let's see which way this came in. So this is the back. I need to rotate this around by 90 degrees. Oops, what happened there? Like so. I'm going to drag this. Where's it gone? Over. Let's go in a quad view actually, it might be a good way of doing it. Hit S to bring that into my view, and I'm just going to do this so it just very, very slightly, if you look here, just very slightly intersects with the wall. And I'll do the same in this view, just so that I know it's actually running across the wall, and I'm going to intersect this again very slightly. I'm going to take my extrusion, I'm just going to say 805, so we've got a bit of leeway to play with. And again, it's not 100% realistic because obviously your woodwork wouldn't go through the walls, but it works for this cause. Now, what I need to do now is just make a copy of this. Now, there are different ways of making copies in Cinema 4D. You could control click and drag up here. You can control click and drag on one of the arrows here, which is what I'll do. Let's just do that. So control click, drag it out. Now I've got a copy. I'm going to rotate this round. Now what I can do is I can rotate this round like so. Just hold shift till I get 180. And to line up on my axis, I can come down here and on the x-axis just get rid of that minus. And you can see it's all lined up. I could do the same on the Z. And that won't work obviously. So let's bring it down and find the right view for this. Make sure it's through the view. Now if I make little mistakes and things, I'm not going to edit them out because I think that would kind of cheat you a little bit, because everyone makes mistakes and I just want you to see how quick it is and easy it is to fix those mistakes. Okay, I'm going to make a new material and I'm just going to, oh, you know what, I need skirting boards probably on the two sides as well. Now they may not be seen and that's okay, but they may well be. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this one here, control click and drag. Let's do this in a top view and swing this around, holding shift to constrain that, and now I'll drag it down. It's going to be way too long, so let's just take that extrusion number down. It's going to be like 600 and something, I think. Oh no, 5. Okay, and I'll drag that one down, control click, drag, and rotate that round by 180 and flick that across here, bung it up there like so. Now I do need to make sure that they are they're going to be in this view, so hit S, just make sure it intersects the wall, which is the wall line, that's that one, so it's got to go here. Let's grab the other one, do the same thing. It's too far back, so that needs to go there. And now that's all good. So I'm going to grab all of those, and just to neaten up my kind of admin, I'm going to hit Alt and G, and that will group all of those under a null, which can be moved around on its own so that all 4 of those children objects will go with it. So let's just call this skirting, and I'll just save my scene. Okay, so this new material is going to be called, I'll just call this glosswork. And I'm going to go to the color and I'm going to make this a very, very slightly off-white. Now, one thing I always try and tell people is that you never ever get a perfect white or black in nature. Like in the real world, it just doesn't happen. Everything's got a slight excuse me, variation in it. So I'm just going to make that kind of very slightly off-white. Reflectivity, let's remove the default. Let's go back into add a GGX, and for this one it's going to be pretty simple. Layer mask is going to be a Fresnel, and I'm just going to leave that fairly default, I think, for now. I think that'll be fine. Layer color I'll leave as is. I am going to increase the roughness fairly substantially, probably up to getting on for 50%. I'm going to reduce the reflectiveness like so, and I'm going to give some actual Fresnel to this layer as well, and I think that's fine. Now you find this looks a little bit grainy. Now when we come to doing a final render, we can come down to layer sampling and we can increase the layer sampling here, but at the moment we'll just leave it as is. I'm going to come into the bump and I'm going to give this some bump, and I'm going to use some noise for this. Now this is hideous, that's fine, so I'm going to choose a more appropriate one. I'm going to use one of these ones that looks like it's got kind of chips in it. I think this Poxo one is particularly good. It's the wrong way around though, so I want little chips and dents to come out of this rather than be kind of raised little chips and dents. So I'm just going to make this white, make this one black, and now you can see I think this effect is a bit better. The scale's probably going to be wrong, but we'll get it on the actual object before we decide about that. It is going to be a bit strong, but if we just come here to this slider, we can reduce the strength of that down to, say, 2%, maybe a touch more, 5%. So this has got just a little bit of that kind of bumpiness on it. Okay, let's just select all 4 of those objects and right click on the material, press apply. Now you can see that this is being stretched on this object just a bit too much. So tile on the U, which is the Y axis, looks pretty good. But let's make this tile here probably, let's go for about 10. And there you go, that looks much better. It might still be a bit overpowering, but hopefully it'll actually be quite subtle when we see it in place. So let's go to our camera view again, and let's just do a quick render region maybe, just to, let's just click and hold on the render button, go to render region, and let's just do this section here. I'm just going to let that render a second. And okay, so you can see there's still a bit of blotchiness, but the shapes are looking fine. One thing that is very obvious to me is that the floorboard texture is actually a little bit small. So let's come over to our floor, let's grab that tag, let's just increase the size. So let's go, I'm actually going to double it I think, so let's go 200 by 200, and I think that's probably going to be better. Again, we can adjust that as and when we see fit. So next thing to do is, I think, probably a dado rail. So we can just go to a new scene. Let's just go into a quad view. We'll go into our front view here, and we'll do the same again as we did before. Enable snapping, make sure that work plane snapping is on, and this one is going to be a bit different. So I'm just going to zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. It's not going to be that much different to before, but a little bit. So let's go. If you're ever stuck for the shapes that you should be doing this sort of thing, then just Google it. There's plenty of reference material out there. Just going to grab all of these 90-degree angles, including these ones down here, and right click, go to chamfer, like so, and then we have a couple here that just need a little bit of softening, and that gives just a nice bit of detail. I am actually going to just smooth them off as well. Now what I'm doing here is, rather than chamfering these points, I'm coming in and just going soft interpolation, and that just smooths them off like so. Okay, so let's do the same again. We'll add a extrude to the scene, make the child, the profile a child of that. Let's call this dado, and actually let's grab that, and this needs to be about 10 centimeters tall, so let's make sure we're in object mode. It's already 11, so it's just a touch big. Let's just shrink this down until it gets to about 10, which is fine. Just going to copy that, press V, go back to our set scene, paste this in. I'm going to use a quad view just to start getting this in place. Now I'm using the lines of the cuts that I made earlier as a place, like a locator, which is why I cut them where I did. So let's just lift that up, rotate myself round 90 degrees, actually a little bit too big. There we go, that's better. Now I'm going to go into my side views just to line these up, same as I did. Feel free to skip ahead a couple of minutes if you don't want to see this. So let's bang this one into the corner of the room. Okay, so let's line this up. Again, I'm going for just a little bit of overlap here. I need to make that dado extrusion, what was that needed to be? About 805, just so it fills that wall. Okay, let's create a copy of that. Let's rotate that by 180 degrees. And it's just go into this side view here. Whack that over to here. Again, not 100% necessary to have this one. Oh, I've made that a child of itself. Okay. Let's grab that again and just drag out a copy, rotate it round 90 degrees that way, bring it back there. You can just see in this right hand view where it's just intersecting the wall. I probably need to just move it in this view to intersects there, and one more copy for the other wall. Now, I said early on in this video that this wasn't always necessary because you might not ever see it, and I stand by that, except that this is a fairly obvious detail, and if we ended up having something reflective in the scene, I think it could just help to kind of sell that a little bit. Now I'm just going to reduce the extrusion of this. It doesn't need to be quite so long. I think that's okay. And the other one again is a bit long, as you can see. Just bring this down. Not going for an exact measurement here. The intersections are fine. Okay, now you can go ahead and you could make a completely different shape and just grouping these the same again. So select them all, Alt G, for the picture hanging rail. But what I'm going to do is actually take that group, Control click and drag, and I'll just call this picture rails. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift that whole group up until it sits about here. Now, one thing that I want to do is have a different colour on the three sections of wall. So similar to how I did it earlier on with the floor, I'm going to just make some selections again. So if I come into polygon mode, what I'm going to do here is just hit UL, which is a loop selection. I'm going to create a selection here, so select all of those polygons, hit V, and just go to select set, and this is going to be called walls lower. Drop that tag selection, come in, loop select to the middle, V set selection, and call this walls mid. Again, drop the tag back to the room, and now I'm going to set what I want to do now is actually get the selection for the ceiling or the roof, which is this one. Double click it, just going to add to that selection, and there we go. Right, now one thing I haven't mentioned, and it's not for this particular scene overly important, is can you see how these polygons that are selected are kind of a blue colour? Let's just back off from the camera for a minute, and on the outside they're grey, the same as the underlying mesh. Now that's showing the kind of the normals, which is the outward facing part of the geometry. So what I need to do is select everything. So I can do that by hitting UW, and any of that geometry which is connected to it will be selected. I'm going to right click, and if we come over to, where is it, normal, oh, here we go, reverse normals, so, or UR. Click that, and now the outside of these walls, which we'll never see because this is an interior render, are now facing inwards, which is exactly what we want. So I can drop that selection, and we have now tags and geometry that faces the right way. So if I go for, it's going to be walls lower, I can create a new material for this. So let's double click, create a new material. Let's call this walls lower. It helps if you spell properly. I'm going to apply this, and I'm going to double click it to open it up. Let's just go to color. I'm going to add a image to the color channel here, or I would when that opens up. Here we go. Let's go materials, MX7. Let's go to something like, well, floor and wall. Let's go for flocked wallpaper. I always like the flocked wallpapers. Let's choose which color we're going to go for. I think black and white might be a little bit. What do we reckon? I think this one. I think that's quite nice. So let's go for that in the color channel. Now this is obviously too long, so if we grab the tag and increase our tiles, I think this is probably going to be too many. We're on UV mapping. I'm going to put this into cubic. Let's go. I'm just eyeballing this to see what I like. I think that looks alright. And I'm going to go to my reflectance channel, remove the specular. I'm just going to add a GGX here, which is really rough. The color, I think I'll just leave the color as white. Now for the layer mask, I'm going to add a texture, and I'm going to go back to that same texture folder. Now which one is it? It's going to be the clip, and what this will do is it will mean that the shiny parts, or the more reflective part, will be the kind of the flocked bit, and you can see it's kind of doing something here, but this looks ace. I really like this. It's a good look. I do need to change the color, I think, to keep it in touch with the underlying image. And that was flocked wallpaper, that one, bit strong. Let's turn down the reflection brightness quite a bit, and I will add some Fresnel, because as we know as CG artists, everything has Fresnel. Right, okay, let's go for some bump. Now the bump is going to be the clipping thing. Now it's going to be subtle, we don't need much of it. We don't want it to detract too much from everything else that's going on in the scene. And I think for now that's probably fine. We might come back in, refine that reflectance at some point. So we need the walls really, so let's make a new material with this bump here, which is the mid. So let's select those, double click to make a new material, and we'll call this wall mid. And this is going to be pretty basic. It's just going to be a kind of a white wall. I'm going to use an image for it though. I have somewhere, if I can remember where, a really nice, just a white, is it man-made? Maybe. Just a note on textures. There are loads of texture libraries available. Now I use Maxwell Render for a lot of interior work, and there's a Maxwell material library which is available for free online, and they are really beautiful materials, but best of all they're driven by texture files, which is what I've been using here. So I definitely would suggest having a look at some of those. I can't remember the name of the one that I liked. I think it might have been floor and wall, white wall paint. Here we go. So I have a diffuse map, which you can see has just some slight variations in it. I have a roughness map, so I can have some actual texture, and then you can see what it looks like when it's applied. So for this slot, the color map, I want the diffuse. For my bump, I want to add the roughness, and that's quite a subtle map, so I might actually just push that just a little bit. Reflectance, I am going to have a mask here, but I'm going to use the Fresnel, and then I'm actually going to use a fusion again. So if I open that fusion, I can have a bitmap here, which will be the white paint rough map. Okay, now I should change that from a specular. That was silly. I change that from here. Yeah. So if we go to type, I'm going to make that GGX, and obviously need to make that a lot rougher. And I need to bring down the specular strength and kind of the global reflection brightness, because it's way too reflective at the moment. Yeah, that's looking better. Okay, so is that applied yet? No, I don't think it is. So let's take that and apply it to there. So you can see we had the room and the tag selected, so it's applied it to the right place, but it hasn't applied it in a good scale. So let's change the mapping to cubic. It's still too big, so I'm just going to make that about 3 by 3. That still might be too big actually. Let's go 5 by 5. Yeah. Okay, so if we zoom in a bit here, you can see, hopefully the video is picking this up, you can see the kind of look we're going for. Now there's a very slightly discernible bit of tiling here. You can see, let's get out of this tool, you can see here and here there's some pattern repeating. Let's take this, and if we just choose seamless here, it will just kind of flip it. Actually, in some cases, as is this one, it doesn't look better. Sometimes it does. This one it doesn't. Right, so back to our camera view. This is taking longer than I thought it was going to, so I apologize for that. I think this wall texture could be applied to the ceiling as well. Let's go, that's the walls, that's the roof, so let's double click. Oh, I didn't add that selection. Let's reset that. So select, set selection, roof, that's fine. So now that's all applied. I'm going to go back to that wall mid and apply it to the ceiling as well. This needs to be changed to cubic. And then, what did I have? 5 by 5, wasn't it? So 5 by 5. So they're all the same. And let's do a test render. So I'm just going to render, I'm just going to drag, you see there's a grey line or a darker line down the side. That's defining what's out of our full HD view. So I'm just going to drag that over. And I'll render this and I'll be back in just a second. Although actually, before I do that, I'm just going to grab this tag for this material. I've decided I'm not so keen. I think it should be narrower. More like so. Maybe a bit more. Yeah, okay, that's better. Right, so I'll render and I'll come back once this is done. Okay, so I'm not going to let this render stop, carry on, sorry. I'm going to stop it now because there's a few things that I can see that I'm not overly keen about it. First of all is the kind of the detail between, there's no kind of like shadowing between some of these objects. I forgot to put the gloss white on the dado rail and the picture rail, which is a bit silly. The bump is way too strong on the floorboards, as you can see here. And I think I'd like to change the direction of the lighting a little bit. So I'm probably going to put a placeholder object in here to be kind of like our pretend focus until we actually get around to doing the modeling in future videos. So let's just stop that for now. And first thing I'm going to do is to just kind of help some of the more subtle shadows sitting in here. I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion, and to do this we come down to effect in our render settings panel. I'm just going to go ambient occlusion. I'm going to leave the defaults for now. I think they'll be fine, but that will help. I will just show you very quickly what that's done. So if I do, say, this darker corner again over here, what it does is it takes kind of recesses and it adds a fake shadow into those recesses. Fake is kind of an odd word to use when none of this is real, and shadow is not quite the right word either, because it's not coming from a source of light, it's coming from geometry. Hopefully you can already see in just this little bit that's preview rendered here, that already looks more realistic. It looks just that little bit better. I do need to fix those other things, as I said, so let's go for the picture rails and the data rails. Let's just select all of those, and I'm just clicking and dragging to select the first four, then shift clicking and dragging to collect these other ones. I'm going to go to this gloss material here and just hit apply. Now what did I do for the skirting? I can't remember the settings I used. So it was 10. Okay, so if I grab all of those and I just turn that to 10, that will make the bumpiness and everything work a bit better for us. Now let's go back to the floor, and excuse me, oh, my phone pings away at me. I think the normal is probably what's a bit strong here, so I'm going to turn that down to 50. And this is, as a rule of thumb, when I'm changing things like this, I usually go for kind of broad strokes first. So this is 20%. I'm going to turn it down to, I'm actually going to turn this down to 5%. Bump works probably a bit better. Let's just do a quick render region of the floor in a bit of the dark and a bit of the light to see how that's changed it. When you're doing small revisions like this and you're working on a scene and just refining some of the stuff you already have, just doing render regions like this, just choosing little areas to focus on, is a way more efficient way of working. You don't need to be spending time doing re-renders of the whole image, because that will just take you an age and you'll stand there just staring and waiting, and you'll end up losing focus on what you're doing, which is never a good thing. Okay, so we'll probably be able to tell as soon as these couple of buckets are done. That may still be just a tiny bit strong, but I'm going to leave it for now. I think it's okay. Right, so let's just bring in an object to use, because I want to change the direction of the light slightly. I'd like to have the light go up the wall a little bit as well as just on the floor, because that would add some really nice contrast. I've also decided that I think because this window might be in the scene a little bit for some renders, I want to just make it fit a bit better. It's actually too short, so in this kind of architecture the window would come down past the dado rail and it would also go up past the picture rail, which means that we need to adjust both those rails and the geometry of the windows. And I'll also put in some fake panes. I'm not going to worry about the glass and things like that, because we might not actually see the geometry, but if you imagine there was window frames in here, you'd see them in the lighting. So let's do that first. I'm going to come out of my camera view. It's probably time to save my scene, so I'm just going to save over the top, and let's come out a little bit further. Let's just zoom out, bring this over. Oh, and you can see that I've made a bit of a cock up here, because we need to be in object mode, grab that and that. They're in the wrong place, which is a bit daft. Right, so just save that again. I'm going to drop those selections, And what I need to do, I think, probably first is I'm just going to concentrate on this area. I'm going to go to the cube, which is my room, and I'm going to grab some polygons. So I need to be in polygon mode. I need to grab that one, and that one. Oops, shift click, that one, and that one. Now, this may screw everything up, but actually no, it's fine. Let's have a think about this rather than just jumping in and messing it up. So the top one and the top one, they can come up to see. What I need to do actually, I think, is I was going to try and just kind of blag my way through it, but I think I actually need to do it properly. So I need to take another loop, cut KL, and make a cut there. I need to, oops, I'm just going to grab my normal selection, what's the best way of doing this? I'm going to grab that one and that one. Should be able to just drag them up now. No, that's not going to work either. Undo that. Okay. Let's kill off those. Let's take my edge selection, and let's grab that one, and that one. Let's bring them out. Okay, so not the most elegant solution, but does the job. Now if I go back to my camera view, yeah, that's better. Okay, so what I also need to do though is, as I said, is take these picture rails. I need that one. Let's just go to object mode. Bring this on the wrong one, aren't I? So Dodo 1. Bring that to there. Actually going to push that around to here. If I line that up roughly with the window, like I say, it's not going to be in the view, so I'm not overly concerned. Although this first section between the back wall and the window frame might be. This will mean I need to duplicate that a little bit, so I'm going to control click and drag and just get that in place. And this is, again, it's for reflection purposes rather than being in render. Bring that back like so. Okay, now I'm going to do a quick flip into my quad view. So I'm going to use the right hand view for this. And I'm going to, so you can see these are the window shapes. I'm just going to grab some cubes and very, very quickly I'm just going to, and I'm using the grid here to help me a little bit. I'm going to go to, this is essentially going to be, actually there's a better way of doing it. Ignore me, choose a plane and make sure the plane is on the x-axis. Just move that up, line it up with the center of my window, just about there. I'm going to decrease its size to the width there, but I'm going to make the height of my window, which is about there, and I want this to be 1, 2, 3 wide and 4 wide, and let's have a think about this. So 4 wide and for tool, I think should probably work. Yes, okay. So what we're looking at here is going to be in the middle of the room. It's not going to be in the window yet, but that's okay. Let's just zoom into it. Let's have a better look. So this is my window. If you imagine these are the panes, what I'm going to do is make it editable by hitting C. I'm going to go into polygon mode, and I'm just going to hit Command A to choose all of them. Then I'm going to hit I, which is a inner extrude. So rather than creating depth on the object, it creates kind of an inset version. Now what I need to do is just turn off preserve groups, otherwise it will just make one inset of all of these 16 squares. So if I turn that off, what I can do is I can bring these in. Oops, what happened there? Bring these in like so. Delete those with the backspace key, and now I have window frames. I'm going to give these some depth now. It's not 100% necessary, but I think it might work. Oops. Let's just select all of those. Hit the D key to extrude them out like that. Now I'm going to give them some backs, so create caps. In the attributes over here you can see caps. And I'm going to use the spacebar to drop that tool and bring it. I'm going to go into my quad view, probably this side view, and I'm going to drop them back. Oops, need to be in object mode to do this. Drop them back into the window frame. Now you can see that there's a slight error here. That's okay. Just going to hide all of those picture rails. Now you can hide things by using these traffic lights. So when they're red, nothing is showing. When they're green, they're forced to be shown, and then when they're grey, they're just kind of default. Now this line is the top of my window, and this line is the bottom. So let's just line that up centrally, and then use the scale tool, which is T, and then the y-axis handle to line that up like so. I'm just going to overshoot very slightly in both axes, just so we don't get too many errors. Now this is, you know, clearly not overly accurate for, you know, let's just call this window frame. Yeah, this isn't an accurate representation of a Georgian window, but what it does do is will help sell what we're doing when we come to render other objects. Okay, so what I can see here is that some of the loops that I cut in the room itself weren't exactly right. So I'm just going to select them. It's an easy fix. Move them across like so. There we go. Okay, so let's just drop that. I'm just going to save again. Let's turn back on our rails. I've got a feeling one of these might need some tweaking. Let's go to our camera view. Yeah, so we've got the same problem with the dado rails as we had with the picture rail coming up over the top here. There's also some, you know, we've made some new geometry here, so we need to apply that material to it. We also need to make a window frame if we want to, but actually, you know what I could do? I could just, as this is 3D and this is all 3D is about, I could just cheat, move that across, so it's not even in view, which is okay. I am perfectly comfortable with that. I think that's a good thing to do. Right, so what did I want to do? I wanted to change the lighting. So let's take that light, and I was going to look through it again. So if we go set, I'm just going to rotate. Actually, let's get the object in the room first. So I'm just going to look through the normal camera, and I'm going to import. I'm just going to open another video. I'm just going to open another object. So I need to go to my server, and I'm going to go to, what am I looking for? Objects. Why am I not seeing it? Oh, models. Let's go for let's just put a chair in there. Let's go for an Eames LCW, one of my favourite chairs. Just going to bring that into the scene. Now this is a lower chair. No. Let's just see, is that sitting on the floor? Should be. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to turn it around, and as with a lot of the other things I do inside Cinema 4D, I like to have a couple of shiny balls, because shiny balls are always good. Let's just use a different view. It's a bit big. Stick on the floor like so. This should be rendering perfect. So here we have an option for render perfect. Just going to push that back there, and I'm going to create a copy of it just by control clicking and dragging, and the copy will be smaller. This is just a habit I got into. There's no real reason for you to copy this part, but it helps me when I'm visualizing a scene. It helps me understand what I'm doing and what I'm looking at. Just make sure that, and I'll put them, where should I put them? I'm going to put them there. Okay. Right, so now I can go back to my light. Am I actually still looking through it? Should be. Oh, I need the light selected. Camera. Use camera, set active object. Right, so now I can tell where this is actually looking. So what I want to do is highlight this chair with some shadow as well. Now what I could probably also look at doing would be to have the sun coming in through this window, because it will also go in through that window, of course, because it's a distant light and it comes in kind of a parallel fashion. So this will be nice because it will get the pattern of the window frames shining into the scene as well, and that's kind of what I wanted. And I also wanted to have a bit of the light on the wall, not just on the floor. So now I will pause this while I render it, because this will take a little bit longer, which is absolutely fine. And I'll do the whole scene here, and I'll just save before I do that. Okay, so I'll start this going. My wood's missing. Okay, right, so if you ever see that, let's find the material where it's missing from, which is this palisander. If I go to load image, asset catalog, models, what was it I was looking at? Chairs, Eames LCW, should have textures in here, palisander color, that's what I want. I'm not going to copy it. That just didn't copy over properly for some reason. I've not used it anywhere else, I don't think. Is it in the bumps? Okay, that's already copied in. That's fine. Right. Let's try again. Like I say, oh. What's that missing from there then? Was it the bump? There we go. Okay. So yeah, like I say, I'm not going to edit this for mistakes. It's sometimes interesting to see where people screw up, just so you can see how they fix it, and if there's much in the way of kind of like chin scratching and umming and ahhing, which I know I'm guilty of, and I do waffle a bit, so I apologise for that. Right, so I'm going to just press pause on the recording, and I'll be back when this is finished. Okay, so render's just finishing. This is looking more of what I wanted, but it still, you know, needs some work, needs a bit of tweaking. I think the materials all look reasonably good. I think the glossy one needs to be a bit glossier, so let's do that first. Let's increase, I'm going to decrease the roughness until I get some of that shine back. I think I was just a bit tough on that. We'll go for there. what I've done here is I've increased the specular and the reflection strength by probably about a third each, I would have thought. So that's looking good. Now let's go back into the render settings, and if we go to physical, I'm going to change this from low to high. The sampler as adaptive is fine, I'm happy with that. I'm not going to worry about depth of field, I'm not going to worry about blurriness, subdivisions, or any of these. In fact, for now, I think they're all fine. What I'm going to do is come into global illumination. I'm going to add one more bounce, so I'm going to make that 4 bounces. I think what I need to do is go to my light, my main light. I'm actually going to change this from ray traced to shadow maps, which is a bit softer, but also a lot quicker. I'm going to increase the intensity of this by quite a big amount. I'm going to increase this by 20%. I'm also going to come into my sky material here, and if we come into illumination, generate GI, the strength is on 100. I'm going to increase this massively to 150. I'm not going to change the saturation because you can increase or decrease the kind of color uptake of what this image produces. But I think that's going to be a bit of a help. I'm also going to increase the bump on this chair material. So this wood from this, I'm going to increase because that didn't look enough to me. Probably quite a lot because it's quite subtle. Let's have a look. It's quite a subtle thing, so let's do that. In fact, let's just crank it right up. I'm going to go to 82%, which is probably too much, but that will tell when we do a little test. I also completely failed. In fact, let's just delete that one I made. I'm going to go to create, and we're going to use one of the node presets, and I'm going to go to a metal, and I'm going to drag and drop this onto my shiny balls, because everybody likes shiny balls. And I'm going to go to metal, and I'm going to change this to chrome. I want these to be nice polished chrome balls. Now this will highlight if there are areas of reflection which are going to be noticeable that we need to fix. So that was quite a quick change. I'm hoping that some of that illumination has cleaned up some of the patchiness we saw, some of the blotchiness from the GI. Although what we can do is we could come into the irradiance cache and we could smooth it, we could change the density. In fact, the density is probably a good thing to do. Let's make that high. Cache files, don't have to worry about that. Options are fine. Yeah, I'm happy with all of this for now. Let's do a test and see how it turns out. Now, I am going to do a full test for this because I want to see what's going on with the whole scene, not just particular bits of it. So I'll set that off rendering, and again I will just pause this so you don't have to sit watching it. Okay, so things are looking better, but I think they could be improved. There's still some blotchiness. I think I might change some of the settings for that. I also think the chair and the balls, or whatever is going to be the subject of our focus, is perhaps just a little too close to the wall, and so there needs to be maybe more of a light on it. So I'm just going to pull back a little. So I need to take the protection tag off my camera. I'm just going to drop it on the sky just for a minute, and I'm just going to pull back. Maybe I'll rank. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just angle it and place myself just slightly differently. Then I can grab those objects and just bring them forward. Oops, or even down. Bring them forward like so. Obviously you can play with this as you see fit for whatever objects are going to be in here. And don't forget, this isn't a scene as such. I'm not creating a scene here. I'm just creating a set for objects to sit in. So this could very easily just be a simple 3-point light setup with a kind of a curved backdrop. In fact, if that's the sort of thing you want to do, I'll just show you very quickly an easy way of doing that. Again, it's with a box. Let's make it a 4 meter by 4 meter box. make it editable, and let's just go into like so. I'm going to take my loop cut, I'm going to cut around the bottom, cut around a third of the way in there, around the front, and then you do one there and one there. And what you do is you put this inside a subdivision, which gives you your curved set, like so. Let's just grab the whole thing and move it up. Let's just go into object mode, take the whole thing, just move it up 2 meters so it sits on the floor, and there you have a very simple set which you can just hit the T key and make it whatever size you want from that point onwards. And all you would do is you would take, let's say, an area light. Let's just flip it around, lift it up about so. Let's give it some properties. We'll make it just very slightly off white, and we'll give it some soft shadows. I'm going to create a copy of that, and I'm going to make it a cooler color, and I'm going to drag that off to the side, rotate it around like so, and then I'll take another copy of it, rotate it around, have that facing slightly front on like so. Let's just bring it around a bit, bring it around, and then I'm just showing you this is a slightly different way of doing things. If I take 2 spheres and the ball now, oh, what's going on? There we go. If I now take these, go into this new scene, just drop them in here, they should be already sitting on the floor like so. And if I go into my render settings, just leave it as standard for now. I will have some ambient occlusion, and I'll have GI. I use one of the presets, and I'm going to use this as a visualization, and excuse me, I'll leave that like that for now. Oops. Let's set up my view. These 3 things are sitting just above, or just under, excuse me. They're sitting ahead of the curve, that's the problem. Right, of course. Okay, let's grab a camera. So obviously this is a way faster way of doing things. I'm going to put this as a 50mm lens, and let's just do a super fast render here, and see what happens. Actually, you know what, I will add an HDR, just because I think it helps. Don't need reflectance. So this is kind of like the 5-minute way of setting up a test scene. Materials, HDRs, all industrial hall, I'll do nicely. And apply that to the sky. This shouldn't take too long to render, it's a pretty basic scene, but it will also look reasonably nice. Now the reflections in the chrome, you can already see there's not a huge amount going on in there, but this is a super fast way of doing like product visualizations. And considering this is the built-in Cinema 4D render, they look pretty good. And this is mostly down to nice materials, but also Cinema 4D's, the built-in render is pretty nice. This could obviously do with a fair bit of refinement, but if you want to knock out quick tests, to show a client of an object you're working on, this is an ideal way of doing it. There are plenty of like light rig setups and stuff out there, and many of them are very good, but you don't necessarily have to work that way. This is perfectly good for what we're doing. Now there's some faults, obviously. This ball is floating off the floor and this one's sunk inside it, but it looks good, and it does the job. Anyway, let's go back to our other scene, our set scene, and I'm going to change now, I think, from the physical renderer to the standard renderer, and I'm just going to do a test first of all just to see how this comes out. So apologies for that kind of random tangent I went on then, but I think it's important that you see that you don't have to spend an hour setting stuff up. Now obviously if I was doing this just for myself, I wouldn't be doing all the explaining as well, so I'd whip through it in far less time, but it's important that I show you. So I'm just going to pause this again and we'll see what the standard renderer does with this. So I flipped over to the standard renderer, and I think it's looking a lot better actually. This has been going for quite a while, and I think it's because I've got Camtasia running as well. It's normally a lot quicker than this, but you can see everything looks clean and nice. I think there might be a bit too much reflection in this white wall, so I'm just going to have a quick look at that material and just see. Just going to have a quick check in here because I think it might be a bit strong. So yeah, I'm going to turn this way down, which will also speed up our render. I wonder if the sampling, no, that's fine. Okay, so really I think we're just about done. This is just a room to set up for, you know, the renders that we want to do. If you're making a model, it's nice to have a place to put it. I'm going to save the other set I made just because I think that's also a good example, and we can use that as well. So if you've been following along and you're new to Cinema 4D and I've kind of skipped stuff that I take for granted, please tell me, and if I'm going too slow, likewise tell me. This has taken quite a while to record this video for what is actually very little amount of work, and I want to make sure they get it right for you. This is going to be the first in a fairly kind of expansive course, I would have thought. So there's going to be loads of tutorials, loads of stuff I want to show you, not just all the modelling and lighting and applying materials, but S22 has some great new UV tools, so I'd like to show you those, and then we'll look at doing some motion graphics, and we'll use fields and all kinds of stuff. Volumes are really cool. Looking forward to recording that one. And I've got some music projects on the go, which because I have another account which is the Oyster House Boys. Feel free to head over there and have a look. And the two worlds are going to collide, so look out for that, because I'm going to be doing some motion graphics to go with the music and some music to go with some animation and so on and so forth. Please do all the like, subscribe and everything if you don't already, and let me know what you'd like to learn how to model, because the whole idea of this is to show you guys what you want to do. So if you want to model a hand or a chair or a bookcase or whatever it might be, a car, let me know, and let me know how much detail you want. If you want me to just do a wheel, then that's cool. If you want me to show you how to model a whole car, then likewise I'll do the same. So yeah, tell me what you want to see. I'll probably refine this a little bit further, and if I do, I'll let you know what I do in the following video. I think for now the only thing that I can really think that I want to do is just play with some lighting a little bit. So before we go, I'm going to turn off the indirect light, and I'm going to turn off the sky. I'm just going to put that down, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add a IES light. I'm probably going to add a couple of these. I was waiting for an IES file. Not sure I've got any on this machine. Let's have a look. I don't think I do. Alright, so I think for the next video I'll move some of them across into this machine, because they're all on my big workstation, but I will add 2 more lights, and these will be kind of overheads. I'm going to make them into spotlights. So at the moment they're omni. I'm going to make them into spot. We'll have soft shadows. Let's just move them down. Now they will go off screen in a minute, and I'm going to have a couple of these as like room lights. Let's just warm them up substantially. Probably about right. If we go to details, we can give these a nice like fall off. So at the moment it's set to none, but if we go to inverse square, and the 5 meters, I'm going to go a little bit longer. I'm going to go to 7.5 meters, and I will turn on coloured edge fall off, which gives a slightly more realistic look. And let's take the second one. So I'm going to hold down Control, click and drag. Oops, did get one. Yeah, and I'll pop that over here. Let's just make sure they're kind of in the right place. So I've got the two of them in my top view. I'm going to place them so that both the cones of the lights hit the wall and hover just kind of over the subject of our scene, like so. I might bring this second one just across a little bit, and I might take both of them and increase the size of their cones. So the outer angle is what you're looking for here. So I'm going to make them just a bit bigger and just play with their settings. I think like that. So if we were looking for something a bit more dramatic, this might be quite fun. Okay, so I'll do a render of this, and you would have seen it already because it will be the opening render of this video. Okay, that's it for me. For now, I'm just going to save this, set it rendering, and I'll see you all again in the next video. Thanks very much. I've been Rob. Bye-bye.